I think it's finally time to have the difficult conversation. NASCAR doesn't really need any more 500-mile races, especially not at mile and a half. So outside from maybe the Coke 600. That one can stay if you guys really insist. But anyway, let's talk about Atlanta. How's it going, y'all? My name is Eric and welcome to Out of the Groove. Hope you all had a good weekend. I had a great time today watching the NASCAR Cup Series race at Atlanta, largely thanks to our new sponsor, Mr. Steak. Mr. Steak sent me some delicious prime ribeye steaks to enjoy. Mr. Steak focuses on bringing the steakhouse home, and they do this by sourcing their cattle from ranchers that supply many of the top steakhouses in the country. Today we're cooking a couple bone-in ribeye steaks. They also sent us a bunch of different types of their seasoning. Let's go try this out. Be sure to also check out Mr. Steak's infrared grill, which cooks at twice the speed of a typical charcoal or gas grill. They have a whole line of grills available with numerous heavy-duty features. Their grills are perfect for tailgating, camping, boating, fishing, the beach, or for small balconies or patios. Mr. Steak is committed to supporting their local American communities throughout the entire process. Their beef is hand-cut, aged in-house for a minimum of 28 days, frozen, and delivered to your door in biodegradable packaging. And be sure to take advantage of their Father's Day special. Get a free 12-ounce ribeye steak using code Father's Day at checkout. The special runs through Father's Day, June 21st, but make sure you order by 11:59 on Tuesday, June 16th to make sure your box gets to Dad before Father's Day. For every box sold, Mr. Steak will donate a meal to hungry families in their community through the organization Community Food Share. And they even offer recipes and tips on their website, which came in very handy for a relatively inexperienced griller like myself. The steaks were delicious, really elevated the entire NASCAR viewing experience today. So a huge shout out to Mr. Steak for coming on and sponsoring Out of the Groove and supporting race fans and the racing community. All right, so we have a lot to talk about today. I'm going to talk about the race as a whole. I'm going to talk about the top finishers, obviously talk about the winner. I'm also going to talk about whether or not NASCAR needs to shorten races going forward, because that's become a very trendy topic of conversation around the NASCAR community in recent weeks. We're also going to put this race on the Groovy gauge at the end, but to start with, let's just start at the beginning of the event, the beginning of the race. NASCAR continues to be in the top tier of pre-race, pre-game, pre-event ceremonies. Of course, NASCAR is known for their patriotism. Memorial Day, July 4th weekend. NASCAR is great at their pre-race ceremonies. They go all out. They do it big almost every time. And today, once again, I thought they made a nice gesture at the start of the race. Of course, they began the pace laps and then paused actually after running the first two pace laps to allow NASCAR President Steve Phelps to come over the radio, come over the television airwaves, and address all the recent civil unrest in and around the country. A very special moment, I'm sure, for many NASCAR fans, many young NASCAR fans for sure. There are many people I know that grew up watching NASCAR that really appreciated that gesture from NASCAR, from the drivers as well. Part of that pre-race video they put together. Really powerful, moving moment. NASCAR once again proves that they are the GOAT of pre-event ceremonies, in my opinion. They do it up big, and they are the best in the business, I would say, at evoking strong emotional reactions from their fan base, from their viewers, from, in some ways, a lot of ways, their competitors as well. So credit to NASCAR for that. That's how they began the race. But now let's talk a little bit about the race as a whole. The first significant event happened in stage one when William Byron got loose on a restart and slapped the wall, really ended any chance of him having a good run. Tough day for Front Row Motorsports. John Hunter Nemechek spun out early on, then later on he actually made contact, it looked like, with his teammate Michael McDowell. Michael McDowell spun out. Neither driver sustained any significant damage, but the two front row cars did not run well. Unfortunately, it kind of looked like what we expected from front row at the beginning of this year. You know, John Hunter Nemechek and even McDowell have exceeded our expectations from time to time this season. Today was kind of a strong dose of reality, unfortunately. But aside from a few lazy spins, not a whole lot of major incidents in this race. Some pit road penalties that bit people in the butt. A lot of tire issues, especially late in this race. The race ended with a long green flag run, green flag pit stops as well. We saw tire issues by Clint Boyer cost him what was probably going to be one of his best finishes of the season. Of course, at the end of this race, after the checkered flag, we saw several drivers look like dealing with possible dehydration issues. We saw Bubba Wallace in the middle of an interview seemed to kind of fade out, didn't seem to be feeling too good. Of course, they took him away on a stretcher, but apparently he was all good, just dehydration. So today's 500-mile race certainly wore out a lot of these athletes, certainly put a lot of strain on them, because Atlanta Motor Speedway, this is a hotter Atlanta than we're used to running. Usually we run Atlanta earlier in the year, so it was a slicker racetrack, less grip than even Atlanta usually has. So a lot of drivers dealing with a lot of physical strain in today's race. So we'll touch on some of those things as we go along here, but let's look at the the top finishers from today's race, let's go and talk about the winner, Kevin Harvick. He gets his third career win at Atlanta. It's shocking that he only has 3 wins at Atlanta, given they showed this graphic on the Fox broadcast, but he has dominated pretty much the last 5 or 6 races at this mile-and-a-half track. But this is only his third career win. I say only 3 wins at a track is pretty significant, pretty impressive. He dominated, especially the second half of this race. Martin Truex Jr., who you see got a solid top 5 finish there, actually won the first 2 stages, but Kevin Harvick was never far behind. And in the final stage, during the final cycle of green flag pit stops, Kevin Harvick's pit crew nailed it and kept him out in front of the 19 car, and he really never looked back. Won the race easily. I think there were only 9 cars on the lead lap when the checkered flag flew, so huge credit to Kevin Harvick. I don't mind a blowout from time to time, you know. We all love photo finishes, crazy hectic restarts, but from time to time, I don't mind a dominating performance where the fastest car, the best driver all day, gets the clear victory. I don't mind that from time to time because it kind of reminds us all that Kevin Harvick is really good. If anyone doubts that Kevin Harvick's top 2, top 3 driver in the Cup Series right now, races like this prove that he is. Kevin Harvick, in many ways, I believe, is actually a little bit underrated by many NASCAR fans. He carried Richard Childress Racing, especially towards the end of his tenure there. And the moment he left RCR, which has never been the same since Harvick left, he won a championship with Stewart-Haas Racing. And since 2014, and especially the last couple of years, he has carried Stewart-Haas Racing week to week. You look at those top finishing results there, I don't see a single SHR car down till 17th. Eric Almirola, 17th. Harvick won this race by like 4 seconds. I know Clint Bowyer led some laps today. Good run for him until, of course, he had the tire issue late, which cost him a probable top 10 finish. But my point is that today's run for Clint Bowyer in similar equipment to Kevin Harvick was kind of considered an outlier. A better than usual performance for Bowyer. Whereas Harvick dominating was kind of just business as usual for Kevin Harvick. We have our expectations in the right place for Harvick. We expect him in the top 5 every week, and we expect him to win. It'd be in contention for wins every week. But he is carrying the banner for SHR. Cole Custer was a non-factor today. Eric Almirola was a non-factor today. Clint Bowyer had probably his best race of the season going until they just couldn't get the right rear figured out. They had that car so trimmed out that it was consistently wearing out the right rear more than any other driver was, and that ultimately cost them a good finish. So that's all I'm saying. Harvick is carrying Stewart-Haas Racing. If he was not driving that 4 car, if they just put another average driver in the 4 car, Stewart-Haas would be a mid-pack team. They might not get any other drivers in the playoffs. I'm serious. Stewart-Haas Racing is Kevin Harvick, and I won't count out Rodney Childers, his crew chief. I think it's very much Kevin Harvick and Rodney Childers. Without either of those guys, or even without just one of them, they are not the same race team they are today, and they likely do not have a championship since 2011 when Tony Stewart, a Hall of Fame driver, was behind the wheel. Kevin Harvick makes this team a championship contender. So yeah, I do still feel like he is in some ways slightly underrated by NASCAR fans today. I feel like NASCAR fans like to look at Kyle Busch, they look at Jimmy Johnson, they look at those types of guys when we talk about best drivers in the sport. Sometimes we overlook Kevin Harvick, but he is absolutely phenomenal. I've never been the biggest Kevin Harvick fan, I'll be completely honest, but even I can understand and acknowledge greatness when I see it. Let's keep looking at these top finishers here. Joe Gibbs Racing, a pretty good day for them. You see all 3 of their cars in the top 10, top 5 there. Good runs for guys like Truex and Kyle Busch. Eric Jones had a top 10 run going, but had contact with Christopher Bell on a restart, and that ultimately cost him a good performance, a good finish today. My pick to win today was Ryan Blaney, another solid top 5 finish for him. Didn't quite have winning speed this week, but he's been fast at all of the bigger intermediate tracks this year, so I expect big things down the line from Blaney, especially with a lot of intermediates coming up in the middle of this summer. Relatively quiet day for Team Hendrick. Nobody in the top 5, but a couple top 10s. Bowman not too far back. We've mentioned William Byron had issues early on. Kurt Busch, good day. Matt Kenseth, his teammate, top 15, not too bad. Another good day for Richard Childress Racing. Their 2 cars genuinely look like playoff contenders this year. We've given Tyler Reddick a lot of praise for being one of the most outstanding rookies so far this year, but this is the 3rd week in a row that Austin Dillon has had top 10 speed. I know he didn't quite get a top 10 this week, but Austin Dillon has looked really good this year. After looking really bad last year, he's turned the corner this year. I'm pretty pleased with what I've seen from Austin Dillon, especially since the hiatus. Not pictured, but Bubba Wallace, who of course was dealing with those dehydration issues after the race, did finish 21st, so a solid day for Bubba Wallace. Just wanted to shout that out as well. So now let's talk about today's race as a whole. There's a couple things we've learned since the hiatus, since NASCAR returned a few weeks back. One, we don't need nearly as much practice each weekend as the NASCAR Cup Series typically has. There are still questions about the future of qualifying, the future of midweek races, all that type of stuff. But another thing we've learned over the last few weeks is that shorter races seem to typically be more entertaining than longer races. And more importantly, I think we've proven at least that shorter NASCAR Cup Series races don't take away from the overall NASCAR race day experience. The Coca-Cola 600, of course, a 600-mile race known for being long, that's kind of the whole point of that event, was 4.5 hours long. Minus there was a rain delay in the middle there that actually made it over 5 hours long. The race part itself of the Coke 600 a couple weeks ago was 4.5 hours long. Today's race at Atlanta was well over 3. It was right around 3.5 hours long. And a lot of vocal fans I'm seeing believe NASCAR needs to consider shortening 500-mile races, especially at mile-and-a-half tracks. Texas has 2 500-mile races a year. Atlanta has a 500-mile race every year. And I'm going to be honest, I agree with them. I do not think Texas should have any 500-mile races. I certainly don't think Atlanta should have a 500-mile race anymore. I think 350, 400, maybe 300 for some of these tracks is honestly a-okay. Just look at other motorsports. Formula One never holds races over 2 hours in length. You look at even IndyCar, when they returned last night, welcome back IndyCar, their race at Texas Motor Speedway was only 200 laps. It was roughly a 2-hour long race. And I know people hate it when I compare NASCAR to stick and ball sports, but look at stick and ball sports. The NBA, their games are consistently less than 2.5 hours long. The NFL, right around 3 hours. Major League Baseball games were consistently over 3 hours in length. Their ratings dipped, so MLB has been desperately trying to shorten the length of their games to right around 3 hours. Like I said, I think a couple of weeks ago in a video, I believe the sweet spot for the NASCAR Cup Series needs to be in the 2.5 to 3 hour range. I don't want to shorten these races, make them sprint races. I don't want to cut them in half. I know today's race at Atlanta wasn't particularly exciting for the most part, but I still don't want to see 200-mile Cup races. No, NASCAR is supposed to be a little bit of endurance. It's not a 24-hour race. It's not a full-on endurance race, but you saw the drivers sweating and dehydrated at the end of the day here. It's physical. NASCAR is supposed to be physical. But I do believe in 2020 and going forward, when there are so many different types of entertainment vying for people's attention, NASCAR cannot continue to have 3.5, 4 hour long events, especially if they're going to be just kind of stale races like Atlanta was today. There wasn't a whole lot of edge of your seat action in today's 500-mile race. Look, I'm a big NASCAR fan. I don't mind the long races. I sat down and watched all 500 miles of today's race, and yeah, I got a little bored at times, but I don't mind the long length. And I'm sure there are a lot of passionate fans out there that don't mind the 3.5, 4 hour races, and in some cases probably even prefer them. But look around, y'all. NASCAR's fan base over the last 20 years has consistently shrunk a little bit. And look at every other form of entertainment. It's all getting shorter, more condensed, quicker. NASCAR, I believe, is going to have to adapt in a similar fashion. I don't think they need to shorten these things to 1.5 hour long races. I don't think it needs to be that dramatic, but you got to get these Cup Series races down under 3 hours as much as possible. I understand races like the Daytona 500, keep it at 500 miles. People love the super speedways anyways. They don't care if it's all day. Coke 600, keep it at 600 miles. If you want to make that, kind of the defining characteristic of that race, what makes that weekend unique, sure, keep it at 600. But the mile-and-a-halves should never, in my opinion, after 2020, be longer than 400 miles. I would say most of them should be 3 to 350. That's my opinion. I'm curious to hear your opinion down below, but today's race just went on too long. It did. It was too long, and it wasn't enough happening to justify being on TV and being on the airwaves for that amount of time. Anyway, with that being said, let's put this race on the Groovy gauge. Today's Folds of Honor 500 at Atlanta Motor Speedway. Like I said, I've kind of alluded to it. It was a pretty sluggish race. I'm going to give it a 40%. It was a little below average. The first 2 stages were pretty interesting. I know the field got spread out and there were a lot of long green flag runs, but there was still a decent amount of passing. There weren't a whole lot of comers and goers. I mean, Harvick, Truex, Kyle Busch were in the top 3, top 5 pretty much all day long, so nobody really ever broke in there and kind of contended with them. Boyer was up there from time to time. Chase Elliott was up there early, but more or less, Harvick and Truex were out front the vast majority of the race, and nobody really had a whole lot for them. Some of the tire strategy was interesting, with tires, of course, at the end of this race failing. DiBenedetto had to pit. Obviously, Clint Boyer had to pit. A couple other drivers a little further back in the field had to make unscheduled stops because their tires were just burning up too quickly. That's what Atlanta's known for. It eats up tires, man. Restarts, of course, were exciting, but they're always exciting at mile-and-a-halfs with this rules package, but there weren't a whole lot of restarts in the second half of this race, so I give it a 40%. I'd be curious to know what you guys think down below. It was just a race. It wasn't I'm not gonna say it was a bad race. I enjoyed seeing the cars skewed out, drivers fighting it. Obviously, it was difficult for the drivers, as we saw several drivers needing medical attention afterwards. I really appreciate the performance that was put on by the competitors today, but when it's all said and done, I'm not gonna remember this race years from now. It was just kind of there. Not an awful race, but certainly not a good race. I'd put it slightly below average, but let me know what you think on your own personal Groovy gauges down below. And speaking of which, we do have a new t-shirt at teespring.com/store/estep. If you watch this show, you are automatically a 100% on all Groovy gauges known throughout the world. So represent Out of the Groove with a brand new Groovy gauge themed t-shirt. Check that out. I appreciate it, y'all. Thanks again to Mr. Steak for sponsoring today's episode of Out of the Groove. Thank you all for watching. Follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram, subscribe if you are new, and of course, a big thank you to my Patreon supporters. You guys keep this show moving right along. I greatly appreciate your support, especially during these uncertain times. We've got more videos planned here from the not so distant future besides just Out of the Groove, and so I really appreciate the support here. You guys help keep this channel afloat, and I couldn't do this without you. More videos planned this week. Martinsville, the night race is Wednesday night. I am extremely excited for that one, but thank you all for tuning in. We'll have more between now and then. Hope you all had a good weekend. Stay safe out there, and I will see you again very, very soon.